Everybody, and welcome back to another Nasu Nanu video. Face reveal. Now, in Clash Royale, you unlock a certain set of cards per arena, and how it currently is now is not the best in my opinion. I feel like it could be better. So, in this spreadsheet that I made, I completely reorganized where you unlock each card, and I also changed the rarity of most of the cards in the game, because some cards definitely feel a lot more like they should be a higher rarity than they actually are, or even a lower rarity than they actually are. Now, this isn't a perfect world where the Clash Royale devs could completely reorganize everything. So obviously they wouldn't be able to do this nowadays, since once a card has a certain rarity, it kind of needs to stay in that rarity, or else it would change too much. So this is if, like, we're just building the game from the ground up and we have all these cards and we need to organize them into specific rarities. And this is what I would do given that opportunity. Here is just a quick scan of what I've done. Don't leave your comments just yet, because I'll get into the meat and potatoes of it and explain it very soon. Now, there are a few things that you really want to consider when you are sort of reorganizing everything into different arenas and such. One of them is that you want the card to fit the arena that it's unlocked in. So obviously you're going to unlock some basic goblins in Goblin Stadium. In Spell Valley, you're bound to unlock at least one spell, and etc, etc. But secondly, you want the order in which you unlock the cards to make sense as well. Like, you don't want to unlock Mega Knight in Goblin Stadium. That would be stupid. You want the cards that you unlock in Goblin Stadium to be nice, like, introductory cards, very simple to understand. And you also have to keep in mind the cards that you currently have unlocked when you go to the next arena. Maybe Goblin Stadium, you could unlock a bunch of goblins, and Bump It, you could unlock a bunch of skeletons. But you need to also be able to unlock splash cards at that time, so you can actually counter all those swarm cards that you've introduced today. This is really important for the early set of arenas, and it becomes less important in later arenas. You still want to unlock win conditions earlier than any other card, because win conditions are something you sort of base your whole deck around, and you don't want to unlock them so late in the game so that you can't use that win condition for the remainder of Trophy Road. Thirdly, we also want to keep a consistent pattern of card unlocks. In the first few arenas, we have 4 card unlocks here. In the next ones, we have 5. There's also 5 here, and that's just a nice consistent 7 cards here, 8 cards. Like, we just want a consistent sort of spread as well. We don't want in the first arena to unlock like 10 cards, in the second arena we only unlock 2 cards. We want there to just be a nice consistency, really. Fourthly, I'm also changing the rarity of each card if it feels like it needs to be changed. But we don't want to make it, oh, this card's rarity was only changed so it could fit here better. Like, we can do that, but we don't want to change the rarity so drastically that it doesn't even make sense for the card anymore. Like, as a little spoiler, down here I made Hunter a rare card so that it could fit the pattern of 2 commons, 3 rares, and 2 epics in Jungle Arena. But Hunter feels like he could be a rare card if he was released today. I mean, he could even be a common if he was released today. Because the only special thing about Hunter, really, is that he has a unique attack with his, like, spread shot. And some cards as well, they are just so iconic for being that rarity that they just can't be changed at all. Like, some people might think, oh, Log isn't that interesting, it's just another small spell. Why is it legendary? Like, but it's the log, you know? Like, there's this whole chorus when you send it out that goes, the log! Now, going forward, it may seem weird that I put a card in a certain rarity, but there has to be really an equal amount of common, rares, and epic cards in the game for a nice balance, so that way, when you're slowly unlocking everything in the game, all of your common, rare, and epic cards are, being leveled up at around the same time. Legendaries, you don't need to have the same amount of legendaries as the rest of the rarities just because they're their own thing. It's a lot harder to unlock them. So yeah, starting off, we're just going to go through every arena and explain why each individual card is the rarity that it now is and why it's in that arena. And I've even shuffled the arenas around a bit to make it a more enjoyable experience when you're climbing a ladder. So let's finally start and explain all of these cards here. First up is Training Camp. Now, the only change I made in Training Camp is making Mini PEKKA, Musketeer, Fireball, and Giant all common cards instead of rares. This is for 2 reasons. One, now at the start of the game, all of your cards start at level 1 instead of half your deck randomly starting at level 3. And the other reason is because all of these cards are very simple, bare bones cards. Like, Giant's the most simple win condition in the entire game. Mini PEKKA on release, it may have seemed like it should be a rare just because the high damage it does, but nowadays it doesn't really have any special ability that warrants it being a rare. So even if something seems like it should be a rare card, it just needs to become common so that we can have an equal spread of common rares and epics. And you know, these guys are the most simple of the rare cards, so they are going to get moved down to become common cards. Now, before we move on, in the current Trophy Road, you unlock your first set of epics in Arena 6, and then you unlock your first set of legendaries in Arena 11. I actually like this format more than what it was previously, where you unlock 2 commons, 2 rares, and 2 legendaries throughout like the whole game. This is because if you randomly get a legendary in like Arena 4, it's gonna be super overpowered because it's level 9, while the rest of your cards may be level like 4 or something. But unlocking them in bulk at a certain point makes it so that everyone has one of those epic or legendary cards at that moment, and they won't be crazy over leveled either.
No cap, on God, for real, on slime, on Jit.
But with this current format, you unlock 8 epics in PEKKA's Playhouse, and seeing my poor skeleton army and baby dragon all the way down in Arena 6 is just criminal. It also feels like it takes a bit too long to unlock your first epic and first legendary in the current Trophy Road. So instead of your epics being unlocked in Arena 6 and your legendaries in Arena 11, I propose that they should be unlocked in Arena 5 and then 10 respectively. And then in Arena 15, we can unlock champions. This makes it so that each 5 arenas you unlock a new rarity, so it just makes it really consistent. So as we finally get started, we'll talk about Goblin Stadium, where we unlock 2 commons and 2 rares. I think the current format of unlocking 4 cards in the first 2 arenas is really good because it doesn't overwhelm the player with so many different, cards. But the 4 card unlocks that you do currently get in Goblin Stadium could be made better. In Goblin Stadium, we have goblins and spear goblins as the commons. Pretty self-explanatory, they've always been here. But as the rares, we have Goblin Cage and Valkyrie. I like to think when you get like midway through this arena in Trophy Road, you get the choice between Goblin Cage and Valkyrie. And it's a really good choice because Goblin Cage is the first building, and it's a really good counter to the only win condition at the moment, which is Giant. But Valkyrie is a really good counter to the Goblin cards that you unlock here. This is a really nice choice because it's like, oh, do I pick the card that better counters the only win condition, or do I pick the card that better counters all the goblins that people are gonna start using? Now, currently, instead of unlocking Valkyrie, we actually unlock Goblin Hut, which I think is much worse because it doesn't give you that choice of like, oh, do I want to counter which one? Instead, both Goblin Cage and Goblin Hut are buildings, and they both counter Giant. Spawners are also just really annoying to deal with, especially in Arena 1. Like, you don't want your player's first experience to be going up against someone who's just spamming Goblin Huts in the back and having to deal with all the waves. Goblin Hut has had a history of being unlocked in Arena 1, and then being unlocked all the way down in Arena 10 or whatever, and then being unlocked in Arena 1, and then like flip-flopping, everywhere. But I think it's best if Goblin Hut is unlocked later for those reasons. And I found a pretty good spot that it could be unlocked later that we will get to when we get to it. Also, I think that the first spawner you should be introduced to in the game is Tombstone, not Goblin Hut. Because Tombstone, it doesn't do any chip damage to your opponent's tower, and it's only 3 elixirs, so it's not very committal, as opposed to Goblin Hut, which does chip at your opponent's tower and is overall annoying to deal with. And Tombstone is very simple to understand because it spawns the most basic troop in the game, that being Skeleton. It personally should be the first spawner that's introduced to the player, which is another reason why I moved Goblin Hut out of Goblin Stadium. Now, Goblin Cage, despite being a gimmicky building, is a good choice for the first building that the player is introduced to. Because if you don't distract troops with it, it's not really going to be doing anything. This puts players in the mindset of, oh, I should have the Giant go after this building before it goes after my tower. Next up is Bone Pit. Here we unlock Skellies and Bomber, and then Tombstone and Skeleton Army. Tombstone fits here really well because it's the first spawner that the player should be introduced to. And Skarmy is here because Skarmy is one of the most iconic swarm cards in the game. It's very easy to understand, so I personally think it should be one of the first swarm cards the player unlocks. I was hesitant to move Skeleton Army's rarity down to rare because there's no other card like Skeleton Army that spawns 14 troops onto the arena at one time. But when you get down to it, Skeleton Army is just a bunch of the most basic troop in the game, and if it stayed in Epic, we couldn't put it down here in Bone Pit because we haven't unlocked Epics yet, and I think Skarmy should be an early unlock, so down to the rare rarity it goes. Valkyrie isn't unlocked here anymore, which may make it seem like there are too many swarm cards to deal with in Bone Pit, but we just unlocked Valkyrie in the previous arena, and we have Bomber too, so it's not like players are really going to get overwhelmed with swarms anyway, because we have 2 splash cards at our disposal. Next up is Barbarian Bowl. At this point we unlock 3 commons per arena and 2 rares. This is just so that we can fit all the cards that feel like they should be early unlocks down in the early unlock area. For the commons we have Barbarians and Cannon. These 2 make a lot of sense being here. Honestly, I could see Cannon being unlocked earlier just because it's the most basic building in the game. I could even see it being unlocked down in Training Camp, but other cards just fit those earlier spots better, so here it goes in Barbarian Bowl, as Cannon always is. And Baby Dragon is the last common? Yes, Baby Dragon is a common now in this theoretical reorganization, and here's why. Simply put, Baby Dragon is a very simple card. It's just a flying tank that has splash damage. And while you could argue that it should at least be a rare rarity, we need all the common cards that we can get. So many cards in the game, especially the new ones, feel like they should be a higher rarity than they actually are, like Firecracker for example. So moving a card like Baby Dragon, who maybe back in the day felt like it should be an epic because it was unique, moving it down to common just makes it so that we can save room for the other cards that should be in higher rarities over to those higher rarities. It may have seemed like an epic back in the day, but not anymore. I also feel that Baby Dragon should be unlocked pretty early, as opposed to Arena 6 where it's currently unlocked. I mean, minions are our only flying card up until this point, so it's about time we get a new one, that being Baby Dragon. Baby Dragon also just kind of fits the Barbarian Bowl aesthetic personally. Like, I get a very Ren Fair-like vibe with Barbarian Bowl, and what better Ren Fair-like creature than a dragon? So here's Baby Dragon. He fits perfectly here, I think. Enough about Baby Dragon, let's talk about the next new type of card we unlock here, that being a new win condition, Battle Ram. Up until this point, the only win condition that we have is Giant, and so the player has gotten very used to Giant and how to use it and how to counter it. The meta has basically revolved around Giant up until this point, so it's about time we unlock a new win condition, and this win condition is very different from Giant. It's not quite as committal because it's only 4 Elixir, and it's also very fast and requires your opponent to react to it really quickly, as opposed to the Giant where it moves very slowly and you can stack troops up behind it. Now that we've unlocked a new win condition that feels very different from Giant, the game has opened up more, and you have to consider more stuff when making a deck. Barbarian Hut is also unlocked here as a rare, simply because I couldn't find a better spot for it. It's currently unlocked in Arena 9, which means you're going to unlock it and then just immediately toss it and forget about it because it's so bad. Maybe if it was unlocked in Arena 3 though, people might get a bit of use out of it. And now that we've already unlocked a spawner, that being Tombstone, I think it's fine if the rest of the spawners can be unlocked now. The next spawner isn't until a while down this reorganization though, so you don't have to deal with spawner spam. I mean, your only other spawner is Tombstone, which doesn't work well in a spawner spam strategy anyway, so. Next up, Arena 4 is actually Spell Valley. Now, back in the old days of Clash Royale, PEKKA's Playhouse was actually Arena 4, but PEKKA kind of has to be unlocked in PEKKA's Playhouse, and we haven't reached the point in which epics are unlocked yet. So we're just going to have to push PEKKA's Playhouse a bit further down, and so Spell Valley takes its place as Arena 4. This is actually how the arenas currently are in the game, so it works really well. Here we unlock Fire Spirit, Bats, Zap, and Hog Rider. All of these cards are very fast-paced cards. Fire Spirit is a cycle card, you can play it at the bridge, and if your opponent doesn't react to it, they're going to suffer Fireball-like damage. Fire Spirit being the first spirit you unlock is also pretty important because it doesn't have any special gimmick like freezing, stunning, or healing. All it does is just raw damage, and so it's very simple to understand, and I think it's best if it is the first spirit that you unlock. Bats are also a cycle card and great reactionary card for dealing with stuff like Hog Rider, which is unlocked here. And Zap is also cheap and activates way faster than any of the spells that you have at the moment. Zap is also our first new small spell. With all the small/big spells in the game, I wanted to kind of separate them out a bit, and it's about time we unlocked a new small spell anyway. Unlike how it currently is, where you actually don't unlock any spells in Spell Valley. Kind of ridiculous. Hog Rider is just like Battle Ram, but you can't just put a building down and have the ram disappear, so you really just have to be prepared for it. All of these cards are just very fast in a way. You know, a lot of people's decks might become cheaper at this point because there are a lot of cheap cards here. And people are going to start using Hog Riders, so the meta at this point is really starting to shift to become more fast-paced. Wizard is also unlocked here. We already have quite a few splash cards at this moment, Bomber, Valkyrie, and Baby Dragon, so he's not really that necessary at this moment. And he is a bit of a mid-ladder menace, so it'd be better if he was unlocked later, because we wouldn't have to deal with him for as long of a time. But it wouldn't be Clash Royale without some really annoying cards, and here we unlock 2 annoying cards. So with the rest of the mid-ladder menace cards though, I tried to push them back more so that you don't have to deal with them as much. Wizard I couldn't really do that with just because he fits Spell Valley really well, and I couldn't really find a better place for him. And here we go, Arena 5. This is where we finally unlock our epic cards, in which we unlock 3 here, as well as 2 rares just because I needed a spot for those rares. Now I like to think that once you first hit this arena, you get the choice between these 3 epic cards, sort of like choosing a starter Pokemon. The 3 epics being Goblin Barrel, Mortar, and Balloon. Why I chose these 3 epics in particular? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, they're all new win conditions. They work very differently from each other, and they also work very differently from the win conditions that we've had up until this point. The only win conditions that we've had are grounded, building, targeting guys, but all 3 of these new win conditions here don't fit that description at all. So it really just completely opens up the meta of all these new strategies that you can make and whatnot. All 3 fit the aesthetic of Builder's Workshop really well too. You could argue Goblin Barrel doesn't, but where do you think they got that barrel from? Yeah, from Builder's Workshop. And as a bonus, one is a spell, one is a building, and one is a troop. So we cover all of our bases there, and it's just a nice little trifecta, you know? Also, yes, this means Mortar is an epic now. Not only because I needed it to be an epic so that it would fit this trifecta nicely, but because Expo is also an epic, and so why not have both of the siege buildings just be the same rarity? I could have also just put Expo here instead of Mortar, but Expo is a lot more committal because it costs more elixir to play, and it's just a lot more annoying to deal with as well. So I decided to just shove it further down the arena and have Mortar be the siege building that you unlock here. As for the rares, we have Rocket, which is a substitute for Fireball. It counters Balloon, and it also works well with Goblin Barrel, both of which being unlocked here. It also just fits the aesthetic really well. And finally, we unlock Skeleton Barrel. What I like about Skeleton Barrel being unlocked here is that it combos really well with all 3 of the epic win conditions that you unlock here. It can combo well with Goblin Barrel. Mortar isn't a super consistent form of tower damage, so having a secondary win condition like Skeleton Barrel can really help you out. And with Balloon, I mean, they're both skeletons and barrels being held up by balloons, so it just kind of fits. PEKKA's Playhouse is next at Arena 6. Now, epics are on the table to be unlocked now, so from this point forward, we're going to be unlocking 2 commons, 3 rares, and then 2 epics per arena. Now, at this point, the game has opened up to tons of new strategies that you can do, so it doesn't matter as much as when you unlock certain cards where, but I'll still try to keep a nice consistent flow of card unlocks that makes sense. The commons you unlock here are Mega Minion and Skeleton Dragons. Mega Minion, when you get down to it, is a very simple card. He doesn't have any, unique gimmick, so I made him a common instead of a rare. And Skeleton Dragons just because they simply fit the vibe of this arena really well. Bomb Tower and Inferno Dragon are also unlocked here as rares. Both fit the vibe really well, and one of them counters swarms really well, while one of them counters tanks really well, so there's a nice, duology there. Maybe when you get here on Trophy Road, you'd get the option between either Bomb Tower or Inferno Tower. And then Minion Horde is unlocked here as a rare. Why Minion Horde as a rare card when it's initially a common? And I said that we need all the commons we can get? Well, simply because it just feels like a rare card to me. It's a very big risk-reward card. It's one of the most expensive swarm cards in the game, and if your opponent has the right counter to it, it can just be countered by 3 elixir easily with arrows. But if they don't, they can dish out so much damage. I also just needed another rare in PEKKA's Playhouse after I organized everything else, and Minion Horde just fit the bill for me. But if you prefer, you can swap the rarities of Mega Minion and Minion Horde, and they would still fit in this arena, since it would still just be 2 commons and 3 rares. Finally, for the epics, we have PEKKA and Giant Skeleton. PEKKA's self-explanatory. and Giant Skeleton because I like the idea of both of the epics that are unlocked here being just like big powerhouses. Originally I had Witch here instead of Giant Skeleton, but Witch is a bit of a mid-ladder menace like the Wizard, so I decided to push her farther down into a later arena and have Giant Skeleton here instead. I still kept her unlocked before Arena 10 though, because unlocking Witch anytime after that would feel kind of crazy. Next up is Royal Arena. Here for the commons we have Guards and Flying Machine, both not originally commons in the base game. But their mechanics are simple enough that they fit the common rarity. Guards may have seemed like they should be an epic when they were first released, because their shield mechanic was so unique, but since then they've added so many more cards that have the shield mechanic, one of those new cards in question being a common in fact, so with them being just the most basic shield card in the game, it makes sense for them just to be a common card. I mean, just look at Royal Recruits. They have one of the most unique spawn placement mechanics in the entire game, literally like spawning them in a line across the arena, and they have shields, yet they're a common card and Guards are an epic for some reason. It all has to do with when the cards were released, and it makes sense why it's the way it is. But now that we have an opportunity to reorganize the cards' rarities and stuff, I literally just swapped their rarities around. So now Royal Recruits are an epic and Guards are a common. Then there's Flying Machine. Flying Machine, I could have put it as a rare in like Builder's Workshop, but I needed another common for Royal Arena and Flying Machine was there. It fits relatively well, so there it goes. As for the rares, we have Prince, Royal Hogs, and Royal Giant. Prince was actually meant to be a rare in the game's beta, and I think it fits as a rare better. You know, its charge mechanic may have been epic at the start, but nowadays more cards have that same charge mechanic, and Prince doesn't have anything else unique going on about it, so it just becomes a rare. Royal Hogs are already rare, so we don't really have to talk about that much, but Royal Giant, I mean, how did Supercell not make it at least a rare on release? Like, that literally ruined the whole card because everyone overleveled it and then it was just And now for the epics, we have Royal Recruits, which I already explained a bit, and Battle Healer. Bit of a wild card choice, I know, but Battle Healer, when you usually unlock her, it's usually later in the game and you kind of just unlock her and then just toss her away because she's really bad, sort of like Barbarian HUD. So putting her really early in the game might entice some players to use her at least for a bit. That's actually how she is unlocked currently in the game. She's unlocked in Frozen Peak right now, but she doesn't really fit the aesthetic of Frozen Peak like at all, so I just pushed her one arena down to Royal Arena and moved Three Musketeers that were originally in this epic spot further down. Yes, I made Three Musketeers an epic, we're gonna get to that later. I also made Battle Healer an epic because healing is not really a mechanic that's widely used in Clash Royale. The only other card in the game that has a healing mechanic is Heal Spirit, and Battle Healer heals when it spawns in, it heals when it attacks, it even heals itself over time. It has so many, you know, like traits to it that it could honestly be a legendary card. But I thought, you know, I think Battle Healer should fit in Royal Arena, and we haven't gotten to the point where legendaries are unlocked yet, so Epic fits really well for it. Also, Battle Healer is almost always seen with Elixir Golem, and I wanted to separate the cards that are usually always seen with each other. I wanted to separate them out so that players will at least use one for a while without the other. Having Battle Healer this early and having Elixir Golem being unlocked much later, people might start using Battle Healer as her own card instead of only pairing her with Elixir Golem. Now, what I like a lot about the Royal Arena is that it sort of introduces the split lane archetype to the player. We get both the Royal Hogs and the Royal Recruits here, which are both really good like split lane archetype cards. When I originally made this list and had the Musketeers here as an epic instead of Battle Healer, it fit even better because Three Musketeers is also a split lane archetype card. So moving Three Musketeers elsewhere is a bit of a bummer, replacing her with Battle Healer, but I found a nice place for Three Musketeers that I think fits well enough. And as a little note as well about these last two arenas that we've just discussed, you can rearrange these cards to become like back to their original rarities that they have in game, and it would still fit the same pattern of 2 commons, 3 rares, and 2 epics. So if you want, you know, them to be their original rarities, then you can. Next up is actually not Frozen Peak, but Jungle Arena as Arena 8. Now, I actually just swapped Jungle Arena and Frozen Peak Arena's positions. Not because the card unlocks would be better a bit earlier in the arenas, but simply because Frozen Peak seems like a more climactic arena for Arena 10 than Jungle Arena does. Arena 10 is where we unlock a bunch of legendaries in this reorganization. You know, like, you're hyped up for that. You're like, oh boy, we're gonna unlock legendaries soon. And it is cooler if you battle on, like, the peak of a mountain to get to that point rather than just some jungle. I don't know. I think it makes more sense if Frozen Peak is the one before Hog Mountain than if Jungle Arena was. So that's why I did that little swap, but if you prefer Jungle Arena to be after Frozen Peak, then, you know, go ahead. Here as commons, we unlock Goblin Gang and Dark Goblin. These are pretty self-explanatory. Dark Goblin was moved from a rare to a common. And then Poison and Earthquake are unlocked here as rares. It's about time we unlock a new spell, so here are two of them that the player can use. Poison was also moved down from an epic to a rare card. Poison is a substitute for Fireball, essentially. It's a bit more complicated than Fireball because it slows troops down and it has a damage over time effect. So it makes sense for it to be a rarity that's one tier higher than Fireball. But now that I made Fireball a common, we can move Poison from being an epic to a rare, and it will still just have that one tier difference of rarity, if you know what I mean. Now, these two spells don't super fit the aesthetic of Jungle Arena, but honestly, you could put Earthquake and Poison in any arena and then make like a justification as to why. Personally, my justification for Poison is like, you know, Jungle Arena is goblin related. Goblins would use Poison as a tactic because they're like sneaky, you know, guys. They just fit here nicely because the last spell we unlocked was down in Builder's Workshop. Then as the last rare we have, the most forgettable card in my opinion, Hunter. I just like the idea of the Hunter just being in a jungle, like hunting down goblins, you know? And oh yeah, he's a rare now as well, because I needed another rare for Jungle Arena, and he fit the bill for being a rare card. And as for the epics, we have Barbarian Barrel and Witch. With the cards that you unlock here, Goblin Gang and Dark Goblin, you can start to make a log bait deck because you have quite a few log bait cards now. And what better time to introduce a log-like card than now with all these new loggable cards. So there's Barbarian Barrel. And Witch is unlocked here too, simply because this is the best spot for her at the moment. It's not like I would put her in Frozen Peak or in Royal Arena. And yes, I could have just put her in PEKKA's Playhouse, but again, I want to have mid-ladder menace cards be unlocked a bit later than they usually would to make climbing ladder less of a drag. Now, Jungle Arena feels like the perfect spot for Goblin Giant to be here. I mean, just put Goblin Giant in the place of Witch and it's perfect. But honestly, another wild take here, I think Goblin Giant should be a legendary card. I mean, just compare him to Ram Rider. They're both two separate units, one on the bottom that targets buildings, one on the top that has a long range attack. And you could argue that Ram Rider is more legendary because of her snare ability and her charge ability. But Goblin Giant spawns those little spear goblins on death, so, you know, they both have something unique about them despite being the same idea. Bottom line is, this is just all my opinion. Yell at me in the comments if you want. Arena 9 is Frozen Peak, the penultimate arena before Hog Mountain, where we unlock all of our legendary cards. Here we unlock a new spirit, that being Ice Spirit, and a new small spell, that being Giant Snowball. Both just fit the aesthetic really well, and are perfect cards to introduce here. As for the rares, we have Ice Golem and Cannon Cart. Cannon Cart may seem like a really weird choice to put down here, especially as a rare card when it's originally an epic. But the reason for its rare rarity is that, well, look at Goblin Cage. Goblin Cage is just a building that when it's destroyed, it turns into a troop. Cannon Cart's just the same thing, except it's a troop that turns into a building. And it's not like Cannon Cart has any special ability or other gimmick that would make it any higher than Goblin Cage's rarity, and I stuck it in Frozen Peak because I just couldn't find a better place for it. When making a total reorganization like this and trying to fit the cards in the arenas that they could best fit in, you're bound to have some cards that just don't fit anywhere. And while I tried to make it so that I limited the amount of cards that are in that situation, there's just bound to be some, and Cannon Cart happens to be one of them. You could honestly swap the positions of Hunter and Cannon Cart right now, and put Hunter in Frozen Peak just because he has the attire for it. But I just like the idea of him being in the jungle hunting goblins. And finally, as a rare, we have Furnace. You know, it's Frozen Peak, it's cold. It'd be nice if you had something to warm yourself up. Something like a furnace. so that's why Furnace is unlocked here. It's been a while since we unlocked our last spawner, so Furnace goes here very nicely. As for the epics, we have Freeze and Bowler. Bowler is just kind of synonymous with Frozen Peak. He's usually unlocked here whenever Clash Royale decides to reorganize all the cards. And he's also a nice distance away from our previous 5 Elixir splash card, that being Wizard in Spell Valley. And he's also going to be a nice distance away from our next 5 Elixir splash card, that being Executioner in Arena 12. Oh yeah, I should explain Freeze and Ice Golem too. I mean, it's Frozen Peak. You kind of have to unlock Ice Golem and Freeze here. Alright, here we go. Hog Mountain, Arena 10. This is where we unlock all of our legendaries in bulk. Here we unlock the Log, Princess, Miner, Bandit, Magic Archer, Ram Rider, Sparky, and Lava Hound. Now, it may seem weird that the first arena that you unlock legendaries is Arena 10, but you have to keep in mind that when the game was first released, there were only like 7 or 10 arenas. And so it would make sense to unlock a legendary all the way down in Arena 4. But nowadays, with there being 23 arenas, in fact, in this reorganization I actually added 2, so there's 25, it makes sense for them to be unlocked later. And also, as I explained before as well, if they were unlocked any earlier, they would just be over-leveled compared to the rest of the cards that you have at the moment. Now, for some reason, Clash Royale had to unlock all the legendaries in Arena 11, Electro Valley, which seems super weird to me because Electro Valley is the perfect spot to put all of the Electro cards in, and none of the legendaries that you unlock in Electro Valley fit Electro Valley at all even. Is Electro Wizard even unlocked? Okay, yeah, he is unlocked in Arena 11. So is Sparky, so I guess those two fit, but the rest of the legendaries just don't fit in Electro Valley at all. And what better arena to put them in than Hog Mountain? I mean, Hog Mountain feels like a legendary arena. In fact, it was the final arena in the game when legendaries were unlocked, so legendaries are kind of just synonymous with Hog Mountain as a whole. It just feels like the arena that you should unlock legendaries in. And this is also a spot where I kind of just threw the remaining legendaries that didn't have a spot yet, just because the legendaries that aren't in here fit the later arenas that they are unlocked in better. I also wanted to make sure that Mega Knight was not unlocked in the initial set of legendaries. This is because Mega Knight is just the most annoying card to deal with, at least in my opinion, along with Firecracker. Now, unlike when I introduced the Epics and Builders Workshop, where they had like a sort of nice trifecta going on, I didn't get the chance to make a nice trifecta here just because there are so many legendaries remaining in the game and not enough arenas to put them in. So I kind of just stuck as many as I could in here. But in place of having a nice like trifecta of win conditions, I instead made a very nice variety of legendaries here. We have win conditions, we have secondary win conditions, we have support cards, you know, there's cheap cards, there's expensive cards, there's a spell in here too. Just like a really big variety so that when players get here, they can make all sorts of unique decks with the legendaries that are unlocked. And at this point in the game, now that so many people have different legendaries, the meta has basically just completely opened up. Something else about Arena 10 is that this is also where we're going to unlock Goblin Road. So here we have all 3 of these Goblin arenas. I think that the last 2 Goblin arenas should be unlocked at Arena 15. Goblin Road is a temporary thing in the game, and it's actually going to be removed in like 1 day as of me recording this video. So I don't know what they're going to do with the cards that are in here. I don't know if they're just going to like spread them out to the other arenas, but I personally think Goblin Road should be a permanent thing in the game. It's a nice fresh experience from the basic Clash Royale gameplay that we're used to, with a whole new meta and everything. And it's nice that Goblin Road has its own set of card unlocks. In fact, I took the opportunity that you unlock separate cards in Goblin Road to put Goblin Hut in here. As I said before, Goblin Hut has had a history of just, you know, being unlocked in so many different arenas, but I think the perfect spot for it is in a separate game mode, that being Goblin Road. This essentially means it's unlocked in Arena 10, but with all the legendaries that you unlock in Arena 10, you wouldn't be unlocking any other cards in that case, if it wasn't for this Goblin Road, where you still can unlock 2 rares here. And then just going through Goblin Road, we have the Mud Pit where you unlock Goblin Curse, and then the Scrapyard where you unlock Goblin Machine. And then I'll also show the rest of Goblin Road as well. I think at this point you should have reached Arena 15 to unlock the rest of Goblin Road, just so that the skill difference in players is not as skewed. Here we unlock Suspicious Bush. I actually made this card an epic as opposed to a rare. It just feels more like an epic card. I mean, the only other card in the game that has a invisible mechanic like it does is Royal Ghost, which is a legendary. And then Goblin Stein is unlocked all the way down here in Ancestral Palace as sort of a reward for completing the Goblin Road. And another reason why these last two arenas should be unlocked after Arena 15, in my opinion, is because we're going to unlock champions at Arena 15. And because you unlock a champion in these last two arenas here, I don't think you should be able to get a champion before the initial set of 3 once you reach Arena 15. I personally think it should be a permanent thing in the game because, you know, why not, right? So the last arena was kind of crazy with all those legendary unlocks and the whole Goblin Road thing. So why don't we relax on a nice beach with Arena 11 Shipwreck Island. This is our first arena that isn't currently in the game that I actually added to Trophy Road as a permanent arena. But why Shipwreck Island out of all the temporary arenas we've seen so far, and why as Arena 11? Well, this is a bit of personal taste. When I first started playing Clash Royale, I always wished that there was a beach-themed arena or a water-themed arena. Clash Royale arenas are so varied and interesting with their themes for the different like biomes that they take place in and the different, you know, aesthetics that they have, but there's not a beach one yet, which is crazy to me. I mean, there was a beach one, but it was only for one specific season. Honestly, there also might be this beach-themed arena in Clan Wars, but who plays Clan Wars anyway? So growing up, whenever they released a new arena, I was always excited, oh my gosh, is this going to be a beach-themed arena with like pirates? But we just never got a beach-themed arena. We have like every other biome covered except for beach. So just because this is my personal list, I went and added my childhood dream arena, you could call it. Now, because this is sort of like a new arena added to the game, no of the cards in the game necessarily fit that arena exactly. You know, when reorganizing all of the other arenas, it's like, okay, I'll put this card in this arena because it's kind of just synonymous with that arena. But no cards were ever actually unlocked in Shipwreck Island, so this gives me an opportunity to try to make my own reasonings as to why they should be unlocked here. And it was a lot of fun to do that, and here is what I chose. As the common, we have Rascals, and the rare, we have Wall Breakers. Going forward, by the way, there's going to be 1 common per arena and 1 rare per arena, 3 epics, and then 2 legendaries. Why I chose Rascals and Wall Breakers are because they're both like pirates in a way, and there aren't any really water-themed cards in the game, so I had to go with choosing a bunch of cards that feel like pirates, and Rascals and Wall Breakers fit the bill extremely well, so here they are. I also made Wall Breakers a rare instead of an epic, and as for the epics, we have another little trifecta going on, similar to Builder's Workshop, in those cards being Expo, Golem, and 3 Musketeers. All 3 of these cards are win conditions. You could argue 3 Musketeers isn't, but you basically have to base your whole deck around it, so it essentially is a win condition. And they're also all big, expensive committal cards. You really have to build your entire deck around these cards if you want to use them. They also fit Shipwreck Island really well. Expo, you could say, doesn't really fit super well, but Golem, I think, fits really well because, like, you can imagine going to a distant island and getting, like, a curse placed on you or something, and then the like rocks awaken up into this golem or whatever. I feel like it just fits the island vibe really well. The Musketeers are here as well because they have muskets. You know, muskets, pirates, they're kind of synonymous with each other. And that's also why this is specifically Arena 11. We only have so many arenas left until the end of the game, so I wanted to introduce these big, you know, committal win conditions as early as I could. If you wanted to make a deck based on these cards, you don't have to wait so long to make those decks. Speaking of the end of the game, as in Trophy Road, I think it would be best if Arena 15 is sort of like the end of Trophy Road in a way, because this is the point where you would unlock champions in this reorganization. It could be where you unlock ranked mode, Path of Legends. It could be where you unlock all the grand challenges and just like everything in the game becomes available to you once you reach Arena 15. And so everything after Arena 15 is sort of like bonus content or like post-game content. So there are a few cards that you unlock after Arena 15, but they're considered to be like bonus cards. Arena 15 also is at 5,000 trophies, which is a really nice number to sort of end on. But you can keep pushing for those bonus cards after Arena 15 and go all the way down to 10,000 trophies if you really want to. So knowing that Arena 15 is sort of going to be like the end in a way, we should release all the win conditions that we can as early as we can so that people can use them for the last remaining arenas. Oh yeah, and I made 3 Musketeers an epic as well because it's just such a unique card. There's no other card in the game that costs 9 elixir, but can be countered so easily by something like Fireball. So Epic seems perfect for them in my opinion just because of how unique they are. Finally, moving on from that, we can talk about the legendaries here, which we have Fisherman and Goblin Giant. Fisherman kind of just had to be put in Shipwreck Island. He was the only card that genuinely fit the vibe of the arena, so he's got to go here. And Goblin Giant's here too because goblins are like pirates in a way. And here you also unlock Cannoneer. Cannoneer fits Shipwreck Island really well because he has this gigantic cannon, and islands are associated with boats that have like big cannons that fire stuff. I just think he fits really well here. Currently you unlock Cannoneer in Frozen Peak for whatever reason, sort of just like midway through ladder, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I wanted to introduce tower troops after Arena 10 because everything before Arena 10 is relatively simple. Like, you don't have any legendaries yet until the 10th arena, and nobody has evolutions yet, hopefully. Next up is Spooky Town, and then Electro Valley right afterward. Why I swapped the order of Electro Valley and Spooky Town? Well, it was simply because the unlocks in Spooky Town would make more sense to be unlocked a bit earlier than the Electro Valley ones, in my opinion. As Spooky Town's common, we unlock Heal Spirit. I personally think it's really funny if there are all these scary cards that you unlock in Spooky Town, but then you also just unlock Heal Spirit, which is like the most joyful, wholesome little guy in the whole entire game. I just think the irony makes it fit really well there, sort of like how Furnace fits Frozen Peak in a way. Here we also unlock Dark Prince. This one is a bit crazy. I couldn't fit Dark Prince in Royal Arena just because I think that the other cards I put there fit better. So I just had to stick him way later down in the arena, and Spooky Town just fits well. I mean, he's a Dark Prince. It would make sense if he was like the guardian of Spooky Town in a way. I also made him a rare instead of an epic simply because I downgraded the prince to a rare. You could argue that he should still be an epic because the splash damage and the shield make it more deserving of an epic rarity, but I personally made him a rare just so that he can match with the prince. As for epics, we unlock Tornado, Executioner, and Night Witch. Night Witch I actually demoted to be an epic card, and it's our first legendary that I demoted. It's basically just a witch, except it spawns bats instead of skeletons, and it doesn't have splash damage, instead it has a melee attack. It just doesn't feel like it should be a legendary card, because it doesn't have any unique, interesting gimmick that all the other legendary cards do have. And yeah, it spawns one bat on death, but plenty of other cards spawn stuff on death. And so it only makes sense for Night Witch to become an epic card now, and I also just needed another epic to fill out Spooky Town, so Night Witch was just the perfect card to do that with. Now, with my reason for a legendary card being something that's completely unique, you could argue that Goblin Giant shouldn't be a legendary card then, because it doesn't really do anything unique. But, you know, yeah, I guess you got me there. Something that I don't like about the unlocks here is that Tornado and Executioner are unlocked in the same arena. They both just fit the vibe really well, which is why I put them here. These cards are very synonymous with being a combo to use together, similar to Battle Healer and Elixir Golem. And I tried to split up those combo cards as best I could, but these two you unlock in the exact same arena. I couldn't find really a better place for these cards. If I spent a little more time on the reorganization, I probably could have found a place for them that would fit better and still keep the pattern, but they're not super synonymous with each other anymore as much as they were back in the day, so I think that it's fine. As for legendaries, we unlock Graveyard and Mega Knight. I did want to push Mega Knight down so that you didn't have to deal with him as much, but with Arena 15 sort of being like the end of the game, you should at least be able to have a little bit of fun with Mega Knight before the end of the game hits. And so he goes in Spooky Town along with Graveyard. Moving on to Electro Valley, we have Electro Spirit as the common. Seppies are here as the rare card. Now, I don't super like how you unlock Heal Spirit and then immediately in the next arena you unlock another Spirit. So you could like reorganize the arenas at this point a bit so that they're not unlocked right after each other. But I think Shipwreck Island should definitely be the first arena of this set of 5, just because it introduces so many new win conditions, and because our last arena here, Serenity Peak, just makes sense being the penultimate arena before Arena 15, just because, similar to Frozen Peak, it's a very, like, climactic arena, you know? So Spooky Town and Electro Valley kind of just had to be next to each other, and these Spirit unlocks had to be next to each other too. Ultimately, just not a big deal. And then as for the epics, we have Tesla, Electro Dragon, and Lightning. All 3 of these fit the vibe super well. They're all electric themed, And Tesla is an epic now because no other building in the game hides in the ground like that, like Tesla does. It's super unique, and I'm surprised Supercell didn't make Tesla at least a rare card on release. So there it now sits as an epic. And finally, as the legendaries, we unlock Electro Wizard and Electro Giant. Electro Giant's a legendary now because he's one of the most unique cards in the game. I mean, that electric aura thing is super deserving of the legendary rarity. The only reason it's not a legendary in the base game is because they had already released so many legendaries before, and they just needed another epic card, so that's why he's epic in the game, and it's understandable. But now that we have the opportunity to re-rate all the cards, he should definitely be a legendary then. Now for the penultimate arena before the quote-unquote end of Trophy Road, we have Serenity Peak. Serenity Peak used to be the penultimate arena before they added a bunch in a new update, and it makes sense for being the penultimate arena because it's on the peak of this like Japanese style house, and it also calls back to Frozen Peak being the penultimate arena for Arena 10 because they both have peak in the name. And here we actually unlock our last common card of the entire game, that being Elite Barbarians. Elite Barbarians are also mid-ladder menace cards, and I needed one common for Serenity Peak, so why not put the common card that's really annoying to deal with as literally the last common unlock. And then as our rare, we have Royal Delivery. This card is a bit difficult to use because it has a big delay on it dropping, so it makes sense that it would be unlocked really late. Originally this card is actually a common, but it makes sense being a rare because it's basically a spell and a troop in one. As for the epics, we unlock Rage, Void, and Firecracker here. Firecracker is like the de facto common card that shouldn't be a common. She has a unique attack, she propels herself backward whenever she shoots, and she's just a really unique card, albeit very annoying, so that's why I stuck her all the way down here, and also made her an epic. And then we also unlock Rage and Void here. I just couldn't really find a better spot for them, so I kind of just stuck them here where I needed more epics. And while I've always thought that Rage should be unlocked relatively early, now that it's considered a small spell that does damage, I think it should be unlocked later now. So I stuck it in Serenity Peak because it's a nice distance away from the previous small spell, that being Giant Snowball. Or if you consider Tornado a small spell, it's also kind of a distance away from it as well. And then for legendaries, we unlock Ice Wizard and Lumberjack. They both just fit the aesthetic of Serenity Peak really well. I also think that Lumberjack should be unlocked after Rage, just so that you can get used to how Rage works before it's put onto another card. And so here they are in the same arena. So you finally made it through all these arenas and unlocked all these crazy cards and stuff, and you make it to Arena 15, Clashfest. As I said before, this is sort of like the end of the game, and what better arena to fit the quote-unquote last arena than the celebratory themed arena, Clashfest. And here we unlock champions. We actually get all three of the champions that were introduced to us when champions were first added. And we also have the Dagger Duchess here as well. As I said before, this is the arena where basically the entire game opens up. You can play Path of Legends now, you can play the rest of Goblin Road, you can do, like whatever you want in the game. But you can keep pushing if you want to and unlock the remaining cards that I didn't list in the initial set before Arena 15. So without further ado, let's explore the arenas after the initial 15. So you make it through the celebratory Arena 15 and move on to the quote-unquote post-game. Here we unlock all the cards that have really complicated or really interesting mechanics, or just a bunch of cards that I couldn't find a place for elsewhere, so I just threw them way at the end of the game. Kicking off this set of final arenas, we have 10 Elixir Tavern. This also isn't an arena that's currently in the game, but was a temporary arena in a season. I personally think that this arena just fits perfectly here, because similarly after you beat Hog Mountain and then go to the beach, after you beat Clashfest, you relax in a tavern and sort of like have a drink, There's just like a bit of a story there, And what better cards to introduce in an Elixir themed arena than Elixir Pump and Elixir Golem. These are also great introductory cards to the sort of post game, because they change up the Elixir flow of the match. They change the match in an interesting way when you use them that you wouldn't expect. And also at this point in the game, we're going to unlock one epic, one legendary, and one champion per arena. Elixir Pump, I made an epic card just because it's so unique. No other card in the game gives you Elixir when you place it, so it just feels deserving of the epic rarity. And I made Elixir Golem a legendary card because, again, no other card in the game is like Elixir Golem, where it actually gives your opponent more elixir. And because I needed an epic and a legendary card to be introduced in 10 Elixir Tavern, and these cards just fit the vibe of 10 Elixir Tavern and are great introductory cards into the quote-unquote postgame, so that's why the rarity changes are what they are. Little Prince is unlocked here because in his introductory trailer, he actually sort of stole the scroll of who's going to be the next champion in a tavern. And so it makes sense that you would unlock him in the same way he was introduced in his introductory trailer. I also think that's what the seasonal arena was when he was introduced, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Moving on to the next arena is Rascal's Hideout. Rascal's Hideout in the current game is actually around here in the like 10 to 15 arena range, but I moved it all the way down here because these cards just fit these early arenas better, and I wanted Shipwreck Island to be right after Hog Mountain. So Rascal's Hideout has been delegated to a sort of post-game arena, and here we unlock Clone and Goblin Drill. Clone because it's a really gimmicky card, and I couldn't find another place for it, so in Rascal's Hideout it goes. And Goblin Drill because it sort of fits the vibe, and again, just like all these other cards down here, I couldn't really find a place for them any earlier, so I just had to throw them somewhere all the way down here. There's also no champion that's unlocked here. However, as the game goes on and they start to add more and more champions, and like legendaries and epics, I can start to fill out the remaining slots that are missing in these last few arenas. I wanted to make sure that every arena before this was completely filled out and follows a distinct pattern, but with these last few arenas and knowing that they're going to keep adding more cards, it makes sense to leave spots open for those cards that could potentially be added. I mean, we don't even know if the next champion is going to really necessarily fit into Rascal's Hideout, but it's nice to leave some spots open anyway so that we can like reorganize if we need to. After Rascal's Hideout, we have Executioner's Kitchen. Here we unlock Inferno Dragon and Mother Witch. Now, Inferno Dragon is the one card that I'm kind of ashamed to put it way down here, but just because other legendaries fit and other arenas better, I had to move at least one legendary all the way down here into the post game, and Inferno Dragon just happened to be that one. Inferno Dragon is also the only other legendary card that I turned into an epic, because it shares the exact same attack with Inferno Dragon and doesn't have anything else going on other than its interesting attack. So I don't feel like it should deserve its legendary rarity. It also makes sense to be one of the legendaries that should be moved all the way down here, because you already have that unique attack with Inferno Tower. So if you want something like Inferno Dragon, you could just use Inferno Tower. I mean, I know they're very different cards, they serve very different functions, but Inferno Dragon also just fits Executioner's Kitchen's vibe. That's hard to say that 5 times fast. You know, he can heat up the pot that's used to boil stuff. I mean, he could be useful in a kitchen. Pretty weak reasoning, but some cards just had to be delegated to these super far down spots in the game. And then here we have Mother Witch. I always thought Executioner's Kitchen should be Mother Witch's Kitchen, just because Mother Witch is more associated with like cooking stuff. I mean, it even says in her like description that she bakes nice cookies, so it makes sense that she would be unlocked in an arena that's kitchen themed. Next up is Prince's Dream at Arena 19. This is also an arena that isn't in the initial set, but it's so unique that I personally think it should go down here. When Clash Royale added the recent set of arenas, they chose arenas that were just previous seasonal arenas into the permanent set. And the ones that they chose are a bit weird to me. So I looked through all of the previous seasonal arenas that were in the game at one point. I chose the seasonal arenas that have the most variety to them. Clash Royale chose a lot of arenas that take place indoors, and I wanted to replace some of those arenas that they selected with more interesting looking arenas with a more interesting vibe overall. So the arenas that I cut from Supercell's set that they chose are Boot Camp and Miner's Mine. I cut Miner's Mine because all it is a mine, and we already have Dragon Spa way down here that I did select, which is pretty much like a cave already. And we also have a cave arena up here in gold mines, and we don't really need miner's mine and gold mines and dragon spa, which is also like a cave, so that's why I decided to cut it. The other one I cut is boot camp because it just seems weird as an arena. Like, boot camp is basically just training camp, except it looks a little different, so we might as well just replace it with a more interesting arena. So that is why the arenas here are the ones that they are, just because they are the seasonal arenas that I thought were the most interesting. One of those arenas that I picked being Prince's Dream. There was no other arena really like this in the game, where it's just like in the clouds and it's all happy and stuff, and so Prince's Dream was a perfect pick. I'm surprised Supercell didn't pick it as one of the arenas to become a permanent one. Here we just unlock Mirror. Mirror just makes sense to be unlocked in this fantastical arena because it's one of the most unique cards in the game. It's very fantastical in its own right. It just fits, in my opinion. Next up is Arena 20, Royal Crypt. Here we unlock Royal Ghost and Mighty Miner. Of all the arenas that I selected as these later ones, I think Mighty Miner fits Royal Crypt best, just because Royal Crypt is underground, and it would make sense if Mighty Miner accidentally just like drilled into this crypt, just like accidentally. Royal Ghost is unlocked here because this is literally just like his arena, and I would have him be unlocked earlier, but as I said before, some legendaries just had to be delegated to this late game part, and Royal Ghost happened to be one of them, and he fits this arena super well, so we might as well just put them together down here. And after that, we have Silent Sanctuary. This is the last arena that we're actually going to be unlocking cards in, and the two last cards in question are Phoenix and Monk. Phoenix and Monk were both released alongside this arena, so it just makes sense that you would unlock them both here. And it makes a lot of sense too that Monk is sort of like the last card in the game that you unlock, or the last card in Trophy Road, just because he has such a unique ability. You need to predict when your opponent's going to play their spell so you can reflect them. And he has a high skill ceiling. Does he? Does he have a high skill ceiling? I don't know. I don't play Monk. I don't even have him, so I wouldn't know. But his mechanic is just like really about predicting your opponent's moves. And at this point in the game, you've gotten pretty good at that, so it makes sense that he would be like the last card you unlock. You get what I mean? Now, I could end the set of arenas here at only 22, but I decided to stretch the amount of arenas left to a total of 25. That way we just have a nice number to end on in terms of arenas. 25 is just a nice ending number, as opposed to 23, which is the amount of arenas we currently have. So for the remaining arenas, we have Pancakes, Dragon Spa, Valhalla, and of course, Legendary Arena. I wanted Dragon Spa to be the penultimate arena before Legendary Arena, but as I was looking through the seasonal arenas that they have, Valhalla seems to fit that penultimate arena even better. This is the arena that I think Evolved Valkyrie was released alongside, and it's a really cool arena. It's like, there are like golden trees everywhere, and you're like up in the sky. It's just a really good arena to be the last one before you reach a Legendary Arena, in my eyes. And so I put Dragon Spa, which I initially had as the penultimate arena, just one arena below Valhalla. And then Pancakes is just over here as Arena 22. It's actually Arena 22 in the base game as well. So there you go. So that is everything, I think. That is, in a perfect world, if I were, reorganizing everything, how I would reorganize it, and why I would reorganize it in the way that I did. If I missed anything, be sure to say in the comments so I can respond to it. I try my best to read every single comment on my YouTube videos. And if you have any reasonings as to why some things should be reorganized or rarityfied, given a new rarity, also put that in the comments below. Tell me if I did a good job, if I did a bad job, if you think that, where I put everything is balanced. And yeah, for those of you still listening to me ramble, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video in 6 months.